And might I say that channel is one of the most exciting on YouTube for anybody that's interested. Great. So could I have a motion to adopt the agenda today? Thank you. First, Councillor Chalmers, seconded by McMaster. All those in favor? Thank you. Motion carried. Could I have a motion to adopt the minutes of our Committee of the Whole of March 15th? Thank you, Mayor Law, seconded by Councillor Anderson. All those in favor? Thank you. Motion passed. Elise, do we have anybody today signed up for our public comment on agenda items today?
Through the chair, no one has signed up for public comment.
Wonderful. So I do believe that we have a delegation today from Mr. James Rodgers, the co-founder of the Coastal Animal Rescue and Education, the CARE Network, as we know it by, regarding animal care and control services.
James, I've just promoted you to a panelist and you can start sharing your screen as well as your video and audio whenever you're ready. And I'll start timing you at 10 minutes once you start your presentation.
Thanks. Can you see my screen?
No.
How about now?
Yes.
Oh, great. Technology. Well, good afternoon. So I guess if we get started, start the timer.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Thanks. Good afternoon, Your Worship, councillors. I'm James Rodgers, co-founder of the CARE Network. We're a group of about 20 committed individuals and community partners. I have 3 requests of you on behalf of resident and visiting animals and their families. But first, I just wanted to share a little bit about CARE Network for for context. Let's just see if there we go. So did you know that a handful of local neighbors started CARE in 2012? Also, the BCSPCA no longer serves our communities out here. Did you know that CARE started an animal shelter facility at Long Beach, I guess about 2 years ago now? Or that CARE's animal and community work in our region has won awards and is considered innovative. In fact, we just presented at a national animal welfare conference to present our innovations in animal care and control. 2020 was our busiest year on record. And over 2020, I understand Protective Services recorded 8 calls for service, whereas CARE received about 168 calls about animals in need just within the District of Tofino. Many of these folks also called Protective Services, but didn't reach an officer or leave a voice message. And there's just a couple of stats there on the screen. Really was a busy year. These are a couple of our newest residents. These guys all showed up today, including a little baby cow. So as the stat showed, we helped over 750 animals last year. And of course that during a pandemic when our volunteer resources were severely depleted. And of course, we couldn't host any fundraising events. So it's quite a challenge. And over the years, our community services have evolved. Today, our animal services that are considered essential to public health and safety can be divided into 2 parts, one being animal rescue and the other being animal care and control. There we go. So on the rescue side, we provide a variety of services across Clayoquot and Barkley Sounds. Our animal emergency response service is very busy. We respond day and night, every day of the year, to local animal emergency situations. And that includes injured wild animals. I just got a call as I was waiting on hold here about an eagle in distress. So shorebirds, raccoons, sea mammals, as well as, of course, dogs and cats and cows. And sometimes those situations actually include both wild and domesticated animals all at the same time. We do facilitate some animal first aid. We, of course, shelter animals as needed here at the facility, and we transport animals sometimes multiple times a week to services across the island and beyond. And this work is what relates to our council grant application. COVID and the busyness of our community have forced us to enhance this service to make it sustainable. With your support for the critical pilot project that we're working on, that we've proposed, we can establish a new way for communities like ours to help animals in need, which will help mitigate the human-wildlife conflicts, reduce trauma, and save lives. Our plan is to use Tofino Fire Department's successful model of a volunteer emergency service as our template. And so we're pretty excited about it. We've talked to a lot of different organizations and they're excited to see what we can do. And this is essentially whereby volunteers would receive per call out stipends, more and professional training, gear, and overall really have a more professional volunteer experience so we can make this work more sustainable going forward. So request number 1 would be to please support our application for a council grant. That I guess is coming up in the agenda. And so the other side of our work is the animal care and control services. And again, we provide these to communities across the region. This is access to free and affordable spay and neuter services, rehoming of unwanted animals, sheltering of transporting of sick, injured, and unwanted animals across the island. We also do animal bylaw development consulting, and we offer a contracted animal bylaw enforcement to, I think, 4 communities in our region right now. Part of this animal care and control work includes working with stray cats. Now that Tofino SCAT, Stray Cats About Town, has retired, and I believe they were going for about 30 or so years of daily volunteer service to keep the cat situation under control. It's really an incredible contribution from those local volunteers. And you think, again, decades that they worked diligently to manage and reduce the number of stray cats suffering in our community. But now that they have retired, CARE is working on a much needed plan to manage the cat population going forward. Last year, we helped with over a dozen stray and lost cats just in Tofino alone. And more than half of those cats weren't spayed or neutered, including 5 in one situation that were abandoned. And I believe they ended up having 22 kittens in our care just days after we picked them up off the street. So quickly that would become a big problem as far as the stray cats coming back. So our regional plan, for the past 3 years, CARE has been sort of positioning the organization to help Tofino achieve a necessary phase of animal care and control. The situation is now just simply too great for volunteerism to shoulder the burden alone. Also, neighboring communities are paying to manage their animal care and control responsibilities as part of this regional strategy, leveraging, of course, economies of scale. So essentially, Tofino right now is being subsidized by these communities and by CARE volunteers and previously SCAT volunteers, which creates an unbalanced arrangement that I think together we can correct. So again, that brings me to request number 2 here. And that's that this committee recommend to council that $30,000 is set aside annually starting in 2020 for a budget to cover essentially Tofino's regional share of animal care and control costs to keep the community healthy and safe for all residents and visitors, whether they have 2 legs or 4. Request 3 there is that this committee recommend to council that staff be directed to remit the $4,300 in animal care and control funds that District of Tofino residents were taxed for in, I think, 2018 and 19 in each individual year to support the CARE network in addressing the stray cat population right now. So we'd really like to get on the cat situation this year and not wait till next year, but of course, need some funds to get that going. Moving forward, CARE's very keen to work with Protective Services Department to update Tofino's animal bylaw based on some recommendations and amendments that we submitted about 2 years ago. And updating the bylaw will ensure that all of the regional communities are sort of at the same standard, and essentially that Tofino's meeting the example that's currently set by Ahousaht and the Tla-o-qui-aht nations. We really do encourage you to prioritize updating this bylaw in a timely fashion, given its impact on community health and safety, especially with our busy summers and COVID. The district's collective agreement seems to be silent on the issue of contracting out a service that the district is not equipped to manage, such as lacking a proper animal sheltering facility. So I don't believe that the proposal will take away from a current employee. And unless I'm mistaken, I don't believe this work is currently being undertaken by the district. So the District of Tofino's animal contract does, or bylaw here, does include a clause that permits the district's animal control officer to designate someone to act on his behalf as required, which is seen here at number 4A. In summary, Tofino has benefited for decades from the work of dedicated volunteers who've been committed to reducing animal suffering, keeping folks safe, and minimizing attractants such as feral kittens and cats who attract wolves and cougars into human populated areas. Tofino also benefits from surrounding communities who are leading the way and taking responsibility for their animal care and controls. Care Network's regional strategy for animal care and control in the region is based on economies of scale, while also allowing for services to be customized to each community's unique needs. Therefore, we need to initiate such services with typically an animal census. And in your case, Tofino's case, I imagine the service might include temporary animal sheltering, picking up stray dogs at all hours, proactive patrols on beaches to monitor and prevent situations from occurring, such as littering of dog poop, off-leash situations, fireworks, I know are a big one these days, dog and cat licensing, and that sort of thing. And that's what I have for you today. Thanks. Any questions?
Thank you, James. If it was possible, could you take your screen share off?
Sure.
Thank you.
I think I can.
Great, thank you. Council, is there any questions for Mr. Rodgers today? Councillor Thick. Mute it.
Thank you, James. Appreciate your detail and just your requests. I just wondered, is there any support that is available to us, to you, through the province or any other government agencies at all? And if so, what might you be requesting of them?
I'm not familiar with any government money above the municipal level for such services. I don't believe even the SPCA, if I'm not mistaken, it's all sort of donor-based and grants. But yeah, we've never been able to access any sort of higher level government funds, except in cases for grants through foundations. For instance, around COVID, we saw quite a spike in cruelty cases and aggressive dogs due to changes in territory. The human traffic patterns changed, therefore the dog patterns changed, and we saw a lot more of that. And we're able to get some funds specifically to address those kinds of issues specific to COVID. But I don't, and maybe your staff has some ideas from other communities they've worked in, but I'm not familiar with any sort of higher level funding.
Right. And another question is with the new vet in Tofino, is there any relationship or help given from our local vet towards any of the issues that you raised in your presentation? I'm just curious because things have changed obviously in the last couple of years.
Yeah, and so we do work with the new local vet, but it doesn't change anything. And it's not that we get free services. We don't get free services from anybody. So we still have our existing relationships with some vets in Port Alberni. Again, a very good relationship with Dr. Barry and his team here. But just like anybody else, we might get a discount from time to time on this and that, but we pay the costs that everyone else does. So really, it's been just handled on small donations and a lot of volunteerism, and we're just sort of really at that breaking point when you start putting the numbers together, and you look at what other communities are paying for similar services in their communities. It really tells a pretty interesting story.
Thank you.
Councillor Anderson.
Hi, thanks for your presentation, James. I'm impressed to see that you have so many volunteers as well. I'm just wondering, I guess, what funding do you have in place already as an organization? And you mentioned the funding from other communities. Do you fundraise elsewhere?
Yes, we do. So for our emergency animal response services, for that kind of work, that's based on donations, private donations, some grants that we can get from time to time. Again, nothing's necessarily guaranteed year to year. And then some of our other services, like the bylaw enforcement work or regulation enforcement work that we do with different communities, would be a fee for service. So those communities are paying their share for the work we do in those communities. But again, that's what allows us to keep going on that kind of work. And then again, the donations and whatnot, some of the grants get applied to that emergency response related work.
Okay. And then your third request to help support your work with cats, you didn't have any number attached to that. And so there's two-part question on that. Approximately, what's your estimate of what it would take, and is any of that included in your grant application already?
So sorry, I must have missed the numbers there on the cats. I believe in 2018, council approved a small percent increase in taxes of residents to the amount of, I can't remember what the percentage was, but the dollar amount worked out to something like $4,300 annually. And I believe that was for at least a 2-year term. And again, that's either 2018 or 2019. I'd have to look that up. I had the resolution number at hand, but I've lost it here. So that's the number that was sort of set aside at that point. So that was the number we were working with for this year related to cats. We figure it's actually probably closer to a $5,000 cost to essentially manage the cat situation for the rest of 2021. And that includes going out and trapping cats, the spay neuter, all that kind of stuff. And again, the advantage here is that that's not a lot of money to do what we're proposing to do, because SCAT got the situation under control after 30 years. And so we're just trying to keep that from coming back. And again, already, I mean, I just picked up 2 kittens today in Tofino. And it doesn't take, I think every year a cat can have 3 litters and average about 4 to 6 per cat, per female. So the numbers go high quickly. Tofino, fortunately, can still sort of head this off before it gets out of control. Ucluelet, as an example, has probably 3 large colonies right now. Off the top of my head, I'd say easily in the 40 range of stray cats. And so that's a whole nother situation, but that's what we're trying to avoid here. And the situation can get out of control quickly. And we attend meetings, with parks and some of the bylaw officers and various people through our region related to minimizing or mitigating human wildlife conflict situations, and the cats and kittens are a big part of that, because of course they do attract these predators into our communities. So I mean, for the sake of the cats, obviously it's a good idea, but also for the sake of the health and safety of our community members and visitors as well.
Thanks.
Any other questions from council? Councillor Chalmers.
Thank you. And also thanks for that, James. And actually you just answered one of my questions with the predators. My other question was with the $30,000 ask, I got a little bit lost in the talk about this census per community. Is what you're asking for each community, is it related to the census, or is it 30,000 per community?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so it's the census is just is part of the process. Sorry about that. I was a little worried about the 10 minutes and that I would ramble on a little too long. The census is just really about where we start with customizing our services to a community. So for instance, with the Tla-o-qui-aht communities, part of their bylaw includes addressing the cow situation over there in Apitsit. And so that's probably not something that is necessarily going to be needed in Tofino, although your current bylaw certainly covers livestock several different ways, including you're not supposed to ride them in town. So the 30,000 covers the whole list that I gave there of services, not just the census.
Okay, but are you asking this from each community? 30,000 from Tofino, from Ucluelet, from?
Yes, and as I said before, we sort of consider there to be the 5 main communities in the region, and so that would be Ahousaht, Tla-o-qui-aht, Tofino, Ucluelet, and Ucluelet or Hitatsu, and Ahousaht, Tla-o-qui-aht, and Ucluelet and actually Tla-o-qui-aht are all already paying for the services they receive. So it's actually Tofino and Ucluelet that aren't.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor McMaster.
Question for staff more than anything. I just wondered how many dog licenses were issued and how much money we're bringing in each year.
Thank you for that, Councillor McMaster. I couldn't say specifically how much money we're bringing in for that. I believe this year so far we're upwards of around a dozen licenses issued. I think perhaps it ends up being maybe just shy of 50 annually that we actually sell. There's not a big promotion of dog licenses and that to be purchased. We have offered in the last couple of years the opportunity for the Care Network to do some marketing on this as well, and keeping the proceeds for the dog licenses as an opportunity to sort of support what they're doing. That hasn't happened at this point. It hasn't been something that's necessarily been of interest until perhaps there's a larger contract in place. But
Okay, go ahead.
If I could just add to that, so it's not really an opportunity for us, given that it would cost us more to facilitate your licensing program than the returns we would see. Part of that is your bylaw is so outdated, and the amounts being charged for licenses is so minimal that it really is just an expense at this point. So really what's needed here is a comprehensive plan that includes licensing, and I would say licensing of dogs and cats, which is what we're seeing more and more in different communities. But currently the way it's structured, for us to take over your licensing program isn't an opportunity. It would be a liability for us.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you were saying. I know a lot of people who don't license the dogs in this community because they just wonder what's the point. All they get is a little piece of metal to put around its neck, and no services are provided. So I'd agree that our bylaws and services needed to be upgraded if we wanted to charge more. Thank you.
Is there any other questions from council? I did have a question in terms of and it might with Chief Baker on the line there. One of the things that I was interested in is what is the level of, I know one of the requests is for the animal care and control services, and I'm wondering at what level the District of Tofino at this point, what level of engagement is there in that animal care and service potential contract? Where are we at with that?
That's a great question. So myself and Mr. Rodgers have been having discussions for probably close to 3 years now, I believe, which started out with us trying to find a way to manage the issues that we have right now as per our bylaw, which is tends to be predominantly dogs at large. As James indicated in the beginning of his presentation, for the year 2020, we had 8 calls for dogs at large. And so simply dog at large, according to the bylaw, is any dog that's not in the care and control of their owner at that time. When we get calls for them, they tend to be for somebody's dog happens to be out in traffic and that sort of thing, or roaming around on the beach. When we are able to contain the dog, as most people would know, we don't actually have any kennels within the municipality. And so we had initially attempted to try and arrange agreement with the care network for services where if we had collected an animal based on a call, we could reach out to the care network. They could come and pick up the dog from us, and if needed, kennel that dog overnight or a couple of nights. We do have a fairly low number of these instances each year, and when we do have them, most of the time it tends to be sort of well, what we've been seeing is in the off season when the office hours are limited, we end up getting contacted by the dog owners about an hour or so after the office closes, and we've tried to get the dog back to the owner there. When James was making reference to some money that was allotted for care network services in 2018 and 2019, there was about $4,300 per year for a maximum of 2 years set aside for care network services. At which time it was a great opportunity for us that we felt like we did have some services in place. We had 2 occasions where we were called to pick up a dog. We did that, contacted the care network. James or one of his representatives came over quite quickly, took the dogs. On the 3rd time we reached out for care network for assistance, James informed us that he wasn't comfortable continuing that until we had a larger contract in place. And so since that time, we've been trying to come up with what we both agree on are needed services from the care network. We're focusing mostly on the needs that are presented to us, which is collection of animals and short-term boarding. And James has been interested in a larger, more full-service contract, which we have felt at times exceeds the needs as we have right now. And so we have not reached an agreement on where we should be at. It's been challenging for the few times that we've needed the service. We have created a working relationship with the SPCA out of Port Alberni, who have expressed interest in an agreement. But we also understand that this option is not necessarily in the best needs of the visitors and residents, because it means if it's closing time in the office that we might be having to take somebody's pet out of town to Port Alberni, where they could be sheltered there, and that increases the cost to the pet owners as well too. So we would very much like to come to an agreement as far as providing or augmenting bylaw services, which has been the term offered by Care Network in the contract. that's one of the tricky points right now, where we do have bylaw officers, and based on the needs that we're presented with, we feel as though we're able to meet those needs. So we're somewhere in the middle. I think the SCATS program, that's something that certainly the current bylaw team does not have the resources, human or financial, to fulfill those needs. I'd like to see more information about the cost of that program and some statistics in order to see what that might be valued at. But so I do think that there's a need for some agreements, but we just is trying to agree on some terms that is what the bylaw department needs, what the community needs, and what the CARENet would like to see.
Thank you, Chief Baker. I think you answered all my follow-up questions that were coming. So it seems that the sort of a fee-for-service agreement or a larger contract service is a negotiated thing that I would agree to understand what level of service that we may be looking at to provide for the community, and what would be the appropriate amount of money that we could contribute to that. And I think that it sounds like the discussion between Protective Services and the CARE Network is the first stage of this. Before we could even, I think, and this is me talking out loud, ascertain what sort of funding arrangement might be appropriate. And this wouldn't be coming forward until about the 2022 budget discussions to begin with, I suspect.
Sorry, Councillor Stere, if I could. I don't know that that is the first step, because that's been a step we've been on for 3 years. And it's one of those things that, you know, the numbers only tell a certain part of the story, but it's really sort of fantastical to think that is the story, given that we have very solid records, 168 situations last year alone. A quick look on Facebook would also tell a certain story in terms of how many animal situations are actually happening in Tofino. And remember, the only ones that get recorded are the ones where someone got through to an officer, typically a bylaw officer, typically during business hours, or left a voicemail. And what we hear is most people aren't, because they're in some sort of emergency situation with a dog running in traffic or whatever. So it is a little bit, the stats are a little skewed, because, you know, it's making decisions based on limited information and not really looking at the big picture, because there is a bigger picture than just what gets recorded. Those 8 situations are not the only animal situations that happened in Tofino in 2020. Just impossible. So my point being that, you know, it's there's a little bit of a chicken egg situation here, where bylaw services or protective services might not have a budget for more than a sort of a piecemeal approach that addresses a sort of a 9 to 5 situation when they have staff in the office. What we're talking about is a more comprehensive program that's actually going to address animal issues that are happening literally 24 hours a day. And we do get those calls. The phone sits by my head and rings, and we get called out at all hours every day of the year. And that's what we need to really be starting to think about planning for, and not just those 8 cases that get recorded over a year.
Thank you. That's understood. My point being, though, is that at this point, there has to be something that council would be able to look at to bring forward from a budget perspective, to understand exactly what it is from a service standpoint that we're talking about. So understanding what those services that would be delivered, having a comprehensive plan that we may be able to look at to be able to put a budget towards, would be our first step from council, I suspect.
And I'd be happy to provide an outline and a detailed proposal to that effect, if that's what would work for Mayor and Council.
Thank you. If there's no other questions or follow-up, thank you, Mr. Rodgers, for your presentation today.
Thank you.
And we will probably be continuing this conversation, I'm sure. Next order of business. I do not believe there were any correspondence to be brought forward, Elise?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Thank you. Next, we have our presentations and reports, item 7.1, the 2021 council grants, and we have a report from Financial Services.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm just going to take a moment and share my screen. have a brief presentation to start things off. So typically what we do throughout this process is bring all the eligible grant applications in front of council that we received this year. And to assist with things this evening, I am going to go over briefly some aspects of the policy, which was included as an appendix in council's agenda. And then I will bring up a spreadsheet that summarizes each of the applications, and I will have access to that spreadsheet while council discusses the various applications. So the council grant policy outlines that funds are available on an annual basis, and that's typically established in our financial plan. So currently our financial plan includes $25,000 per year for council grants, including 2021. The eligible organizations are not-for-profit community organizations within the District of Tofino, as well as individuals and groups that are sponsored by a not-for-profit organization, which does need to be within the District of Tofino. Eligible projects include capital projects, programs, services, events, or other initiatives that meets the district's overall goals and objectives. The policy references strategic priorities and objectives in any of the plans that council has adopted. So it is fairly broad. The project timeline is 12 months from the date of receipt or issuance, and as a general guideline, grants to organizations will not exceed 10% of the annual grant budget. And so for 2021, it's $25,000. And so a typical grant will be about $2,500. However, in the past, there have been situations where more than 10% of the allotted budget has been approved in an application. So we include that in the policy as a general guideline to applicants and for council to assist with decision making, but for applicants to consider when preparing their applications and submitting their budgets. If the full request cannot be accommodated, then perhaps a portion of the budget could be accommodated up to that 10% general guideline. 2021 grant applications range in value between $1,000 and $6,350. Any surplus funds from the district contribution must be returned with an evaluation report, which I'll reference in a moment. So the deadline for 2021 applications was February 28th of this year. Communications included that the applications were available on the district's website, ads were placed in the Westerly News, we did email blasts and social media posts. In total, 12 applications were received. One application was ineligible because it was not considered an eligible entity. It was a business who had applied, and they are currently applying for not-for-profit status, but it hasn't been completed. So we notified the applicant, and they will try again when their status is changed. The policy outlines that a final project evaluation report must be submitted before any future funds can be released to a particular organization. So you will see in a moment that one organization has yet to submit their evaluation report. The council is still able to have a look at the application and approve funds for 2021, but staff will hold back those funds and we won't send them out until the evaluation report from the previous year has been received. 2020 evaluations are being submitted later than usual due to the funds not being awarded until June of 2020. We were a little bit late last year, as well as some projects had to be delayed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So we were accommodating with all the applicants. We wanted to ensure that we worked with the applicants and they were able to, or given the opportunity to amend their projects to still align with the council policy, but accommodate the restrictions that were in place. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm just going to bring up the spreadsheet, or perhaps I could stop sharing in case there's any questions initially that I could answer regarding the process, and then I can bring up the spreadsheet, whatever is the best approach for council.
I think, thank you, Nyla, for that initial. I think it was very helpful last time to have that spreadsheet. I know in this case we're somewhat undersubscribed, but there may be some questions regarding maybe particular grants, but if I won't be able to see other than what's on the screen share, so that if there is any councillor that has questions regarding specific grant applications, if they want to just chime in, that would be great, because I cannot see you on my screen right now. Here. Oh, Councillor Thick, you're muted.
I think I'm on now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a question for staff, and that was, there was one other policy that I remember reading about, which was that we were not usually in favor of funding core activities. Is that, and I just wonder if you can, for the benefit of us all, just remind us what that would mean, that when we talk about not being so much in favor of core activities, we're saying that we are more in favor of programs and services. Am I understanding that correct, or can you give me a better definition, or am I wrong in my assumption?
Through the chair to Councillor Thick. So core activities would be the typical activities, usually administrative or the regular expenses or fixed costs of the organization. We're not able to cover any of those. If there's anything in excess of that related specifically to the project that's being applied for, then we can certainly fund those activities.
Are there any other questions for staff at this time? Great. If Councillor Thick, you're showing up on my screen. I don't know if you did have another question there. Okay. So if Dewey, as council, would they like to, we are undersubscribed. The only project right now is that I can see that I might have a question around is on the Care Networks application for grant in the amount of $6,350, which is about 25% of the whole total. And within the grant, there seem to be two different components to it in that grant application. I'm just curious if council has no questions about any specific ones or concerned about the amounts of any. I'm just would love some comment whether we would like to approve as presented, or if there are anything specific to bring that forward now.
Councillor Stere, I have one comment, I guess. The one thing was with the Care Network being over that 10%. So I was kind of thinking about that one and hesitant to make, set precedent about doing that too often. But considering we are under prescribed, and as well, looking especially after the delegation and the need and the benefit to the community and how that actually does potentially help with our bylaw and our budget, then I'm comfortable with it if the rest of council is.
Great, thank you, Councillor Chalmers.
I also wanted to comment on the Care Networks application. I'm just as a matter of consistency, I've spoken out in the past about asking more than 10% on these, mainly because it's an issue of fairness to the other applicants for this program. As you can see, many of the applicants held at the 10% at the 2,500, and while I'm willing to consider, funding care, I'm just wondering if we should do it through this program, or if we should consider that separately. There may be other applicants on this list that would have asked for $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 or something, and I'm just wondering if they've held their requests to that 10% mark, and because they're following our policy. So I'm not against care or anything like that, but I think we should always try and hold to our policy when we can. out of fairness to all the applicants. So I'd like to hear from other councillors on that.
May I hear what the policy is? If there is one, are applicants able to ask as much as they would like, any amount, or is there a limit to the asking amount or to the approved amount normally?
Through the chair, if I may.
Yes.
Thank you. The policy uses 10% as a general guideline. Typically, we will receive phone calls from applicants asking to clarify that section of the policy. And what we share with applicants is that it is a general guideline. There have been times where applicants apply for less than the 10% or apply for more. And there have been situations where we have funded more than 10%. And so that's basically the guidance that we do give to applicants. We've also had experience in the past doing participatory budgeting, which was a good opportunity for all the applicants to come together and talk about that a little bit and whether they felt as though the 10% was a good policy or a good guideline, and it seemed to be something that others were in favor of. There is the ability to apply for multiple projects. And it's not just limited to one application. So I know this one has a couple different sections to it. I believe I haven't, I can't go off of memory perfectly, but it is an application that has considered other sources of funding, which is also a requirement in the policy. So some organizations just don't require the full 10% and don't apply for it, and others do require more. And we do provide the guidance that it is just a general guideline, not set in policy. I hope that's helpful.
Yes, thank you. And one more question is, can they be approved at less than the amount requested, or does that require an additional application?
It can be approved for less. I think having a look at the budget that's been provided may give council some guidance on what amount to approve if it will be lower than the requested amount, because the budget does provide some detail, so you're able to fund a certain portion of the application or project perhaps. When that does occur, though, the organization has to rely on other sources of funds not yet identified, which may mean that the project may not be able to be carried out, or they won't know for some time.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else from council that would like to speak towards the issue of the amount requested by the CARE network in terms of consistency, fairness for the process?
Through the chair, I did my hand up. You probably can't see my hand there.
I can't see the screen. I can't. The screen share doesn't allow it.
I just want to say that I do concur with Councillor Anderson. I remember the last time this came up, there was also some requests that were over the 10%, and I believe at that time, if my memory serves me correctly, that Councillor Anderson's opinion on that won the day. And I do want to, I think that's where I stand on the 10%, that it is a good guideline to be held to, and it is fair, and it makes it fair for all the applicants. And I would be concerned about setting a precedent, especially this large of a number from CARE network. I do also want to point out that if there's leftover on this the council grants, there may be options to use those funds later as well. Is that correct, our director?
Yes, that is correct.
I'm raising my hand, Councillor Stere.
Thank you, Councillor Jones.
I am of two minds. So The one thing to point out is that there is another one. The West Coast Free Counseling Clinic has asked for 3,000, which is 500 over the 10%. So to keep that one in mind as well, if we're talking about the keeping it fair. And I do understand that. And what helps me lean towards approving it is that, as Nyla did say, all applicants are told that it is a general guideline. So they do have the opportunity to request more, knowing they may not receive the full amount if they need it. And the understanding that when an applicant does request more, they may not be able to go through with any of it if they don't have the full amount, as they have to look at other places for that. So just to keep that in mind as we're voting on it.
Councillor Stere?
Yes, go ahead, Councillor Thick.
Thank you. Yes, I would like to concur with what Councillor Anderson said, and I think I've looked at all the applications, and maybe something we could begin to think about right now is maybe filling in those blanks with potential amounts approved based on the 10% and what has been requested of just each application as it's requested, and maybe we can see what it adds up to, and then talk about what we can do in terms of what's left and how we might designate the funds we have.
Thank you, Councillor Thick. Nyla, would that, if we can start maybe with that process, that might be helpful. And the question of what may be done with the leftover amounts, or I suspect the undersubscribed amounts, what the process might be for the remainder of that, which now the amount totals $4,500.
Through the chair, I wasn't sure if that was a question for me on what happens with the remainder of the funds, because I was typing at the same time. Was that a question to me?
Yeah, I'm just curious
Okay.
as to what the process might be for either applicants, potential applicants, with the remainder that is left over from, as it turns out, $4,500 in surplus or difference.
So the policy doesn't allow for a second call for applications. So we typically just do one application per year. What has happened in the past is those funds remain available in the budget. And if there is a delegation to council or a request that comes forward from an organization that fits within the parameters of the policy, and council may consider a portion of those grant funds later on in the year, but there won't be an official call for applications.
Thank you, Nyla. And so at the end of this, if we approve the amount that we have on the board now, prospective delegation could come forward and request funding for the potential difference that is there.
That's how I've seen it happen in the past. Yeah, either a letter of request from an organization for funds not specific to these funds, but council has chosen to use the remainder of council grant funds to fund the request.
Great, thank you. So I'll put it back out to council. Would this be, are there concerns about this, or would this be an appropriate way of moving forward and addressing the concerns of Councillor Anderson and others around the fairness and consistency of policy towards the guidelines that have been outlined by the Director of Financial Services? Councillor Thick.
Yeah, just another suggestion, and I don't think in another year I would make this suggestion, but I'm just wondering about what others feel because of just the changing world that we find ourselves in. Would it be a wise or prudent thought to hold back 2,500, which would be in essence, it would be perhaps one organization that might yet come forward or become needy because of the situation that we find ourselves in 2021. That would leave us, if we withheld 2,500, I'm not saying it would not be what I would suggest on another year, but then that would leave us with 2,000. Is that an idea that might help us come to a resolve in this situation that we find ourselves today? Thank you.
I'm not sure I fully understand, Councillor Thick, that you're requesting that we would hold back 2,500 and then there would be 2,000. I'm not sure. Maybe you could explain again to me. Sorry.
Yeah, that's correct. Only because this is a year where there is a pandemic, and I'm just seeing things change, you know, every day, including today, right before our eyes. And I'm just wondering if that's an idea that we might consider this year, which if we did, then that would leave us $2,000, which we could then apportion to the ones that we felt most needed that and would benefit our community in a positive way. Thank you.
Nyla, I would, well, I'd like to hear the rest of council, how they feel about that. And then maybe after hearing that, maybe Nyla, if you could speak to it, how that might be possible.
I have my hand up.
Mayor Law.
Yeah, I just want to clarify what Councillor Thick is saying. I believe what you're saying, Councillor Thick, is keep 25 back, and then which leaves 2,000 to disperse between the West Coast Community Resources Society at $500 to bring them up to 3,000, and then $1,500 to go towards the CARE network. That is what you're saying? This conversation did come up, I believe, last time about giving organizations more than they asked for, and I believe that was not really an option that council went for at that time, because dispersing funds to groups that don't have it budgeted for a certain particular project would sort of defeat the purpose of having those limitations in the application process. That's what I recall from last time. Is that what you're saying, Councillor Thick? So 500 to the West Coast Community Resource Society and 1,500 beyond the 2,500 to the CARE network.
Yeah, I think it's a conversation starter, and I think that we've heard from the CARE network, and I certainly, having heard what the obstacles they're facing, I certainly understand what they're up against. And I also seem to be hearing through the community just this need for this free counseling clinic seems to be quite an urgent need as well. So that would be one way that we could complete this process, as you suggested, Mayor Law.
I'm putting my hands up.
Councillor
From what I remember from last year, one of the reasons that we did struggle with the oversubscription was that the over ask was that we also were subscribed. I'm having trouble with that word today. Last year, so we had to actually bring it down quite a bit. So that helped us in that. Also, one thing that we could look at, I do like your idea, Councillor Thick. Also, we did just have a delegation that did ask for a request to help with the cat problem that is about that $4,500. So potentially that isn't another way to do it where it's fits within the parameters, but we do have a separate request that fits there maybe.
So what I'm hearing is that the question right now might be Councillor Thick's suggestion of allocating the 500 to the West Coast Community Resource Center for the counseling clinic, adding the $1,500 to the CARE network's request. That would leave approximately 2,500 that potentially, Councillor Chalmers, could be requested maybe from the CARE network at a delegation towards I believe it was the cat management proposal. Would you be comfortable with that, moving that idea forward, which would give that opportunity for the CARE network to look at that? It would be a reduced amount, but it would still be an amount that they could come forward to request.
Yes, and I'm not necessarily saying that they'd have to reduce what the request is. They can request what they would like to request, but if we are getting that request, as we did see in the delegation already, so maybe a letter or something, it is a place that we could draw the funds from, looking at it from this way, as opposed to looking at other budgetary ways.
Thank you. Any other
I
comments?
have my hand up now.
Councillor McMaster?
I'm inclined to give them the money. I think the problem lies with us because we issue a guideline rather than stipulating it should be 10%. So we've created the problem. I think the projects they've outlined are good. They've got budgets attached. And I think in this case, I don't really like it, but I think we should go ahead and pass this one, and we should be looking at updating our rules for next year and saying that it's a maximum of 10%. I think we have created this problem.
Thank you, Councillor McMaster. Nyla, could you remove the screen share for now while we're having this discussion, and then we can go back to it if necessary. Thank you. Is there any other comment regarding Councillor Challenger?
Thank you. I do concur with Councillor McMaster, and looking at the grant applications, I felt that, like he said, that the budget was very clearly outlined and covered some different projects, and they've already given us a delegation. So I think if we were to hold the funds for them to ask for another delegation, just wouldn't be necessary if we issued them now. So I'm in favor of issuing them in this case, and agree that we can look at updating our policy on the grants.
Thank you, Councillor Challenger. Anybody else want to comment on this? Okay, so what we have here, Councillor Henderson.
Yeah, I could agree with Councillor McMaster and Councillor Challenger, and I think the rest of council is we've come full circle on this. One of the things I think that we really have to look at and have that discussion about the animal services and what we want to do with that. And I like grants isn't the best way to fund that. Discussion of the service and funding a service is the way to do it. So as usual, though, the issuing of these grants is difficult and kind of a messy way of providing funds to the community. So maybe we can clean up our grant policy and make it really much more clear, how much can be asked for and what types of things we're funding. So I'm agreeing to go back to the original request.
Councillor Law, or Mayor Law, sorry.
I'll once again agree with Councillor Anderson.
Okay, well, Councillor Chalmers.
I'll be happy to move it as in the report, unless there's anybody that would like me to not do that. Do I need to read out each one, or can I move it as in the report, Nyla?
Through the chair, the report does not specify the amounts for each application, but if the resolution were to say that the applications be funded in full, okay. I think that we would know. Yeah.
I will move that the 2021 council grants be awarded in full.
Second.
Is any further discussion? I do have one thing I would just like to say. It has been brought up since my time on council that the questions around the messiness of this process and having a much more clear criteria possibly, so that we don't have to go around in these circles. Nyla, would this be something that would be separate after that we could have this discussion, or do you have enough information that we've talked about here that you could move that forward without a particular motion moving that forward?
Councillor Stere, I don't have a clear direction, but I have during my time reviewed this policy 2 times with council, and the policy became less detailed the last go around, and I'm happy to bring the policy again to a committee of the whole meeting for discussion. But if it were to be more detailed, I think I'd need very clear direction from council with respect to the 10% or the maximum grant amount. I think that could be easily changed if the committee were to make a recommendation regarding that aspect of the policy.
I will call the question on the motion on the table. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, everyone, again. Moving on then, item 7.2, the 2021 Summer Readiness Report from Corporate Services.
Good evening, committee. Council has a report before you that was sent out last week. Just going to try and quickly cover the tops of the waves of what's in that report, and then of course have time at the end for questions and comments from council. So what we want to cover is just a really quick look at what our experience was last year and some of our lessons learned, and I say really quick. And then there's a list here of what our approach is going to be for 2021 that will put us, we hope, in a different place than we were in last year. So last summer is a summer worth forgetting in a lot of ways, but we hope that we've learned from some of the experiences that we had. Council will recall that when the pandemic was upon us in mid-March, we revised, we revisited, we rewrote our budgets, expecting low numbers of visitors to happen through the what is normally the busy season, and reduced our bylaw services, did not budget for an RCMP reservist, did not have extra cleaning happening in our washrooms, and a few other things. We, as we all know, experienced at least normal visitation volumes through the summer season, and I think we all can we all appreciate that the visitors were different and the behaviors were different in a few ways. Certainly, people were keen to get into the open spaces on the beach, as on our beaches, as public health advice was. But we had more short haul, quickly planned travel, and that travel tends to be somewhat different than some of the experience that we had other years. So looking at what we saw, we'll go through a number of items here that and how we're looking at approaching them for this season. Solid waste. So we're expecting our beaches to continue to be busy, and we found a lot of volume last year in takeout containers, overwhelming our garbage containers pretty quickly. So the personal experience I have is I would watch our staff between 5 and 6 p.m. empty the garbages at the beaches, and then I would walk by it at 6 or 7 a.m. the next day and find that they were full and over full. And so we're going to be looking this year at trying to communicate with folks to pack it away if they can, or to maybe make more efficient use of what's going into our waste receptacles. Additionally, some different approaches will be tried. So sistering up of some key locations, so there'll be multiple bins there, or perhaps one larger bin in some locations. And we'll monitor it throughout the season and see how it goes and be ready to adjust as needed. The garbage that you see on the floor in the upper image there, that's not what someone has done at one of our beaches or next to that's a waste audit that Fraser and his crew did throughout the season, looking at what we're finding in our receptacles. And it's a bit of everything, but you can see that no surprise, a lot of takeout containers. And I think that as a community, as an organization, we're happy to support restaurant trying to pivot from a lot of in-house dining to takeout that people are taking to beaches to parks to look to continue to have a nice food experience as part of their visit to Tofino. One thing that we will not be doing, in the budget, we did not budget for improved diversion. That's something that we'll be looking at in 2020 in a much more fulsome way. The seasonal shuttle, we did not have a seasonal shuttle in service last year. This year we will be returning the seasonal shuttle, and we have the opportunity to pilot an electric bus, and this is the bus. It was used in Victoria on the Camosun run. I had the opportunity to do the route with the bus along with Ms. Romont, and it's infinitely quieter, and I think will be a positive in terms of our footprint, but also in terms of the noise on the highway as well as going through neighborhoods. The schedule is not yet finalized. This is a bus that can do a full service day with the routes that we have. We may want to augment that throughout the day or in the middle of the day with a second smaller vehicle on the road to deal with peak times. And as council will recall, this is funded entirely through the Resort Municipalities Initiative grant that comes from the province. I think I misspoke there. I think we also, in previous years, and I don't know what the situation is this year, but in previous years, we get a small amount of money from Tourism Tofino, I think around $5,000. I don't know if that's on for this year or not. Beaches and beach fires. We do have a lot of late night activity on our beaches. There's, one of these photos is kind of famous for a night when we had, in excess of 50, closer to 100 fires on one beach during a time when we had a fair bit of haze in the sky already. We do get a number of calls for service for late night activity on beaches, late fires, and we know that they do provide a disruption. They are a disruption at times to the livability of what I'll refer to as host neighborhoods. We also see unlawful burning, so both in terms of the overall fire size as well as the material that gets put on fires. And the lower photo shows that people do like to roll driftwood into their fires. We also find that, fires can be associated with other unlawful behavior, like alcohol consumption on the beach. So we're looking to change some things for this summer, and council has seen most of this through committee of the whole, and some of it has been approved, and there is more coming to council next Monday in the special meeting, but looking at reducing the hours for beach fires, improving communication and signage, increasing fines, and only allowing fires, propane burning appliances or fires and devices or appliances with introduced air to reduce the amount of smoke that is produced by those fires. So that can either be forced air, or as the bylaw the council will see next week also allows for air to come from under the devices or the fire pit as well for cleaner burning. Parking and road safety. We have been working with and continue to work with Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure regarding parking that happens along the highway, and that's an area of concern, particularly around both Maltby Road as well as across from the Visitor Info Center. And some no parking signs have gone up. I think that there's going to be some permissive signage goes up in the deceleration lanes, but we continue to work with highways on that. We have what we believe is an unsafe situation and are encouraging highways to take responsibility for the road and work with us, those of us that drive by it on a frequent basis. A comprehensive parking plan is coming to council next week, so I won't get into any of the detail, but we're going to next week walk council through kind of place by place and idea by idea for parking that will in some places be looking to convert to user paid parking per the budget that council has already approved. And food and beverage support. So two things. I'll deal with the second one first. Al fresco dining that we had in what was the RV lot next to next to the theater, next to Municipal Hall. We're looking to do that, but on a rescaled basis. So we found last year that it was an appreciated place for folks who had some takeout food to be able to go and eat and be distanced from other visitors or residents. It was probably beyond the scale that we needed. And as we are getting vaccinated and hopefully less risk moving forward, we think that what we did last year in terms of it being hosted and having hand washing stations, we tried really hard to make composting work, but found that was frequently contaminated. So we're going to kind of rescale, use some of the furniture that we purchased last year, and again, do something, but something at a smaller scale. Council last week saw a zoning amendment to enable restaurants in town to extend their patios. And so that bylaw is in process, and we hope to, subject to council approval, of course, have that bylaw adopted in time for the summer patio season. So enforcement is something that always comes up, and as I indicated last year, we found ourselves a little more on our back foot than we would like to have been, or than we thought we would, when we tried to forecast what a summer would be like when we were in March of last year. And of course, it's very challenging trying to hire seasonal employees when the season is in full force. So going forward this year, we are going to have additional bylaw officers, and we're in the midst of the hiring process now. We have also put in a request, and we're about to sign an agreement with the RCMP to have 2 RCMP reservists to be engaged in bylaw and municipal priorities for the season, and they would start first week of June and go to probably second week of September. We find that the reservists are typically used, or we find that we get the best use out of the reservists by having them pair up with bylaw officers and be available for evening patrols, particularly on the beaches, and looking to have our CNP work with us to make sure that activity on the beach is per what's permitted in our bylaws, as well as keeping liquor consumption on the beaches under control as well. With full complement of RCMP as well as bylaw, we will have 7-day coverage from early morning till late evening most days. There will occasionally be a time where an officer is unavailable because of perhaps being ill or being in court, but for the most part, we'll have good coverage throughout the summer. The report references improved mobility. At the end of last summer, the RCMP were on the beaches with their ATVs. We began using a side-by-side, what's called a gator. It's like a little truck, and found that to be very useful for getting around from one location to another. As well, we were able to tote some water around so that we could use that for assisting in putting out fires that ought to have been out before closing time. The mobility also improves officer safety as well. So that's something for us to be mindful of. We are going to be continuing morning patrols. In the middle of the summer last year, we I would say lowered our tolerance level for unlawful camping and sleeping in vehicles, and got mostly out of the business of issuing warnings. And we think that there's enough information out there that people know that they can't camp wherever they like in town, and began issuing fines. I don't know the number, but we have issued several hundred fines now since August of last year for unlawful camping or sleeping in a vehicle. Those patrols actually are underway presently and will continue through the summer. So financial impact. This is, I would say, good news. The RMI, the funding is coming from a few places. RMI funding for the shuttle, as well as for the any money that might be needed for a few things for the alfresco dining area. That's funded by the RMI grant that comes from the province. Council will recall that we received a restart grant from the provincial government in the fall of last year that is to assist local governments in addressing unanticipated costs that are a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we are using that funding for enhancing patrol services, enhancing cleaning that we're doing in our washrooms and those sorts of things. We also have, as I mentioned a moment ago, we've increased the amount of fines that we're collecting, particularly again for unlawful camping, but other fines. The more we're out there, I guess there's more opportunity for collecting from violators. So that is my presentation this evening, and certainly if there are questions, I'm happy to answer them. And I will unshare this video extravaganza. There we go.
Great. Thank you, Mr. McPherson. Any questions from council? None seen. Oh, sorry, I missed you there. Councillor McMaster looked down.
Just a question, Bob, related to garbage and beach fires. If we're encouraging people to clean up after themselves, a lot of people will try and carry, take the ash or hot coals off the beach. It would be good if they had somewhere to dump them, because otherwise they'll probably dump them in the garbage can and we're probably going to have a fire. That's just a suggestion.
Thank you.
Councillor Thick.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. I'm just wondering if we or the public can also know of the bylaw officer hours. I think that would be really helpful, because sometimes, we're just not sure. Should we phone the RCMP? Should we phone the bylaw? And what are the hours is, I guess, my main question. And how can we let people know that, especially the council? And the second one is, yeah, I just looking at, I know that this weekend was hopefully an anomaly, but I think what I see that's changed in the last 6 months is in terms of visitor behavior. There seems to be this sort of understand, or somehow there seems to be a misstep between when people leave their homes and they come to Tofino or a beach community or a resort community. Somehow they think that what happens at their home isn't what happens here. So I think if we can also engage with Tourism Tofino or the chamber where appropriate on, simple things. Like I saw a group of probably 10 or 15 people riding through town, no helmets. I mean, you wear your helmet home, you wear your helmet here. We're not a Club Med. We're actually a community of people that have bylaws. So I just wonder how we can, and how can we foster that attitude that the things that you do at home are the things that you do in a community such as Tofino. So I don't know what, I don't have any prescription there. I'm just saying, how can we foster that understanding, drinking on the beach, fires on the beach, wearing helmets, it just seems to be that people leave their brains at the door when they come sometimes to the community where they're having a holiday. So
maybe I'll comment on the first thing. I think that Chief Baker can give some indication of the bylaw hours that you asked about as your first question. So yeah, we find ourselves continuously looking for communication avenues, whether it's via signage or bulletins or whatever. And as you heard from Tourism Tofino last week, they are willing partners in trying to reach visitors ideally before they get here, so they understand the expectations. The challenge certainly is finding a balance between emailing somebody a list of 100 rules before they come for a vacation of a lifetime that kind of throws a wet blanket over the anticipation of the experience, with maybe some of the key things like what we expect of fires on the beach as an example, or the issue that you raised last week with respect to fireworks. Are there some maybe 5 key things that we can kind of trickle at people rather than flood them with rules? And I think that we have a communications person working with us now. I think that as the summer progresses and we see what's happening out there, we'll be more able to direct communication and find the right messages. So, maybe not a kind of very well-described answer, but it's something that we're aware of, and again, trying to find the right balance between overwhelming people and having them suffer from message fatigue and getting those kind of key expectations in folks' hands. And again, Tourism Tofino is quite a willing partner on this.
Thank you.
And Chief Baker, hours of service. Unmuted would be good.
Thank you. So a couple of things, definitely for the hours of service, we try as much as possible, and I will double check to make sure it's up to date. The hours for the bylaw department are usually posted to the website. So in theory, for the summer months, as long as we're fully resourced, we do operate from 6:30 a.m. until midnight on a nightly basis. There are, as our CAO indicated, times where the hours are slightly reduced, and that's depending on if it's only one officer working at a time, and that may be to 10 p.m. But we do try and lay that out on a night-by-night basis on the website, especially for the summer months. And the bylaw officer, whomever is on duty, carries a bylaw duty phone. So one of the issues that we have is that each morning when the officers come in, they all have different voicemails on their individual phone lines at their desks. And the best way to get a response definitely is to call that duty phone, because that's the person that's actively out in the field and on duty at that time. So those numbers and that information should be on the website, and I will confirm to make sure that that's the case and as often as possible, and that it's updated. And the other thing that I wanted to just really quickly speak to, I think Councillor McMaster raised a really good point about the hot coals and ashes with the different fire pits. One of the provincial requirements that is actively enforced is that everybody having a fire have a minimum of 8 liters of water on hand. So even though people will be using a different style of burning appliance, that requirement will still very much be in place, and that's something that is strictly enforced. So even early on in the evening, as we are passing by and monitoring people's fires, the expectation is that they have it. And if they don't, it either gets put out by us or we stand and wait while they get something to make sure that they're in compliance with that bylaw. So I think that is also something that will really help with that. But it is an excellent point, and the manager of Public Works and myself are already discussing other options for that right now too.
So just one further question then. When we talk about those hours being posted, is this, and I know things might have changed with the announcements today, but are we talking about May 1st, June 1st? Are we talking June to September for those kinds of hours that you mentioned in terms of the bylaw officer? Just an approximate time.
Yeah, great question. I think it changes as we progress through the seasons. So again, depending on our staffing levels and start dates of various positions, we do try to update it based on what our current resource level is and what we're able to manage. So again, I do have to double check to make sure that that is updated and that it's current. So usually, for instance, from now until say May long weekend, it might show what these are the hours. So whatever is posted should be the current hours for that time period. So it could change at times. But again, one of the biggest things that I would like to stress to people is that the best way to get a response is to phone the duty officer line and leave a message, because we are often driving or engaged in conversations with people, and it's not physically possible to answer the phone every single time that somebody calls, but we do get back to people as soon as humanly possible. So we rely on that information being left in a message form with contact information so that we can follow up as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Chief Baker. Councillor Challenger.
Thank you. I had a comment on to add on to something that Councillor Thick said and the response from Mr. McPherson. In the messaging to visitors, I appreciate Tourism Tofino's recent videos that are very positive and appreciation based. And I would love to see or discuss the opportunity for an initiative of a community-wide accommodation provider guidelines for visitors, or something that was positive and appreciation based in a way that's, you know, tips for best enjoying Tofino respectfully, or something along those lines that offer, just like Mr. McPherson said, some key points. And I think that putting it out there with a positive tone rather than these are all the rules, follow them, would be better better received and perhaps more appreciated and respected in that way.
Thank you. Councillor Chalmers.
Just for Jackie Challenger, Tourism Tofino does have some videos they've been working on along those lines, and after I can direct you or send some to you, I'll just have to find them.
Thank you. And Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, just along the same lines, I think the district could go a little bit further, and not just always put it back on Tofino tourism to do that messaging. We do, I think, through our business licensing, we could require that messages be displayed at short-term rentals or for other accommodation type situations. So I think we have to look within the district about what we can do and other ways of doing it as well.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Any other comments?
If I might just really quickly respond to Councillor Anderson. Yeah, agree. Tourism Tofino has the advantage of they've got the ear already of people coming to visit us. One of the things that we are planning to do with a revised business license bylaw that we're overdue getting to council is putting in place, and I keep calling it kind of like a code of conduct. So if you're renting a vacation rental, you have to sign that you've read this thing that says, you know, you can't take your fireworks to the beach or set them off or have amplified music. So it is something that I think we're of like minds on Councillor Anderson, that there are opportunities to message through accommodations, so that as people are coming here, they're aware of what's expected.
Thank you, Ms. McPherson. Anything else from council? Great. Thank you. And thank you, Bob. I'll move the recommendation from the chair here. Make sure I got the right one. That the report titled 2021 Summer Readiness dated April 19, 2021 be received for information and discussion. Seconded for Councillor Chalmers. All in favor? Motion carried. Thank you. Next up on the agenda is 7.3, council appointments for review, a report from corporate services.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I don't have a presentation for you this evening, but I'll preface the discussion with a little bit of an introduction to the report. There is a lot of information included in the report about the various committees that Council has an opportunity to participate in, whether they're internal or external. And the purpose of the report is just to provide an opportunity for all of you to review those opportunities and make appointments as you see fit. Some of those appointments must be made by the mayor, and those are for standing committees, whereas others are purely at the pleasure of council, and those are to the internal select committees and commission, as well as anything external that may be discussed tonight. And I think it's apparent in Appendix 1. However, I did want to clarify something about Appendix 1 where all of the vacancies are listed. So there are vacancies on some bodies. However, the highlighted portions for members of the public are also included in Appendix 1, and I shouldn't have highlighted them. It may have given the impression that you're appointing members of the public tonight, but you are not. This discussion focuses solely on the appointment of council members, and those vacancies are highlighted, but please know that any of the appointments can be changed at the pleasure of council tonight or at another meeting. So I'm here to answer questions about the process and who makes appointments, or any questions about the bodies to which you subscribe. And I'll let council discuss the appointments now.
Thank you, Elise. I appreciate that. In terms of the efficiency of the process, you've laid it out nicely in the report for us here with the recommendations on the table. And if there's no objection from council, if we want to just move through from standing committees, select committees, external bodies, each one, and have discussion around those. And I would just quickly refer back to Elise. Would it be in sake of efficiency as we do those recommendations for the standing committees, for example, that we make the recommendation for each one as we go by? Would that be the most appropriate way?
Yes, I think it is appropriate to discuss each of the opportunities within Appendix 1, just so nothing is missed. And if no changes are made, we can just move on. And if a change needs to be made, then yeah, you would use the motion that's presented in front of you as a draft, and going through Appendix 1 sort of methodically like that may work best, just to make sure nothing is missed in the discussion.
Great, thank you.
Would you like me to share Appendix 1 on the screen, or does everyone feel comfortable with the list and having that in front of them?
I will ask council if I personally have the appendix right in front of me, but okay. I don't know if the rest of council does.
That's good for me too. I have that.
I have it as well.
Great.
I have.
So maybe then if we would like to start from the top with the standing committees, and this is one where the mayor is the one that makes those appointments. The first one up that I have on my appendix is the audit committee, and I will maybe turn it over to Mayor Law at this time to, if he has any changes that might be addressed on this one.
Thank you, Councillor Stere. I did, just to let everybody know, that I did talk to all the councillors about this standing committee, and I found no changes were in order for either the audit committee or the volunteer recognition committee at this time.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Law. That was easy. So if I will just skip back then to, if I can read out from the chair, maybe I'll read out the recommendation that the standing committee, should the mayor wish to recommend changes to, that Mayor Law's appointments as stands.
Through the chair. If I may, no motion is necessary. If no changes are going to be made, we can move on to the next portion of the select committees. Thank you.
You make this easy. Thank you.
Great.
The next would be the select committees, and I will just slip back to my appendix 1 here. And at the beginning of the select committees is the design review panel. And this is council members appointed, and there are 2 vacancies, one vacancy and then a vacancy for the alternate position there. Is anybody interested in this? And maybe Mayor Law, I don't know if you had discussion with some of the previous councillors. I didn't speak to any specifically to this one. If there was in your discussions, maybe to bring that forward, or if any of the councillors want to just raise their hand for that position, we could maybe have that discussion right now.
Thank you, Councillor Stere. Just want to clarify, I am going to refrain and let councillors speak for themselves.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chalmers.
I'm happy to go on either the design review panel or the public art advisory committee. I don't think I'm up for both, but if depending on where everybody else is sitting, and if there's somebody that has a strong desire, then I would be happy to allow that.
Councillor, I actually have a question about this one, Councillor Stere.
Go ahead, Mayor.
Is this a public art advisory committee? Just a clarification of Councillor Anderson is the chair. So this is for the alternate on the public art advisory committee?
Yeah, maybe if I could just, if we can maybe start with design review panel And Councillor Chalmers, I believe you're okay with if we could get you in there, the alternate for the as long as Councillor Anderson was happy staying there, that if we maybe just discuss the design review. Councillor Chalmers, are you saying thank you? What any is?
Sure.
Is the rest of council comfortable with that? Councillor, great. That sounds wonderful. And then is there anybody interested in being the alternate on the design review to fill that second vacancy?
I don't mind.
Councillor Thick, thank you. That would be wonderful. So now I am going to have to make and maybe I'll do that after the public Public Arts Advisory Committee. I could do one right after the other. That might work for me. And so that brings us, Councillor Anderson, or if there's anybody who would like to take over your chair, if you wanted to raise your hand. If not, Councillor Anderson, are you comfortable remaining in the chair?
It's a very comfortable chair, yeah.
Thank you. Is
Thank
there
you.
anybody interested in being your alternate here on council today? Thank you, Mayor Law, for putting your name as alternate there. So maybe I will then I do need to make a motion now, I believe. So for the, let me just get it here. Standing committee, select committee, there we are. That council, let me see who it was again. For the design review committee was Councillor Chalmers, and alternate was Mayor Law.
That's correct. It was Councillor Thick.
Sorry, I wrote it down wrong. Councillor Thick, thank you. Thank you for the correction. So I will then call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Motion passed. And for the next one, I believe, was the Public Art Advisory. Councillor Anderson remains in chair, and I will move that that the alternate is Mayor Law. Seconded. Thank you, Councillor Chalmers. All in favor? Great. So now we can move on. I'll go back to my appendix. Move forward. Public Art Advisory. Select Committees of Council continued. We will do the Events, Arts, Culture, Heritage Advisory Committee. Councillor Anderson, are you really comfortable in that? Oh, Councillor Chalmers, go ahead.
Sorry, Councillor Stere, it's not highlighted, but you and I had spoken about swapping for the emergency programmer.
Yeah.
I just wondered if we were going in order. I just didn't want that one to get missed.
Yes, I'm in order. Did I miss that? The next one I have under the Select Committee of Council after Public Arts was the Events, Arts, Culture, and Heritage.
I'm wrong. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. I will move. Councillor Anderson, are you comfortable in that chair?
I'm happy to stay in that chair too.
Wonderful. Is anybody interested in the alternate position for that? It is vacant. Thank you, Councillor Challenger. Great. And then right below that one, we'll do two in a row here. That way I'll knock off two at a time. So the Emergency Program Executive Committee, Councillor Chalmers and I had a discussion around reversing that she would become the chair on that one, and I would become the alternate on that. Was there anybody else that was interested in that? Good, thank you. I will then, if there is no other further comments, I will move these two right now so I don't get ahead of myself. We'll start, I will move that the Events, Arts, Culture, and Heritage Committee, that Councillor Anderson remains chair, and the vacancy in that one, Councillor Challenger. And then for the emergency program, call the vote on that one. All in favor? Great, thank you. And now we'll move on to Emergency Program Executive Committee with chair being Councillor Chalmers and alternate being Councillor Stere.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Boom. Okay. So then now we're moving down to boards, commissions, and other bodies. Okay, Board of Variance, we're done. Public members appointed by council. Tofino Rec Commission. I did, on the Tofino Rec Commission, I did want to put it out there. I've been involved with the Rec Commission for well over a decade. I have been the liaison there. I believe I maybe would like to extend that opportunity to another councillor. I haven't had the opportunity to talk to anybody else about this. I am throwing it out there that I would like to step back, and if there was another councillor that would like to be in that liaison position, that would be wonderful. I was looking at you, Councillor Thick, and I was hoping that that hand would come up. That is wonderful. Is there anybody else that want to arm wrestle for it or something? No? Okay, great. So I will quickly move that one then, that Councillor Thick be the appointed member from council to the Tofino Recreation Commission. Could I have a seconder?
Second.
Thank you. Call the question. All in favor? Excellent. So we will keep rolling down to external bodies. The first one is the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District, and that is appointed at the pleasure of council. I have been on there and would like to remain. If there is anybody at this time that would have any questions around that. No, excellent. I will then move on to ICE-T. It is the acting mayor or committee member, I believe, Councillor Mayor Law. Yes. Go ahead.
Just to clarify for ACRD, I am the acting mayor alternate. Now, do we have to make a motion for that, Ms. Gotcher-Bergman?
Sorry, for the ACRD, you are the, yes, I believe that there should be more of a concrete appointment to the ACRD's alternate position. So if you would like to be the alternate, then I would prefer a motion that we can send to the ACRD for their records. And then just to clarify for ICE-T, that is a statutory position, and it was the acting mayor when we didn't have a mayor in place. So it would revert to the mayor at this point, and there is no decision to be made on that. It is statutorily made the mayor. So the one motion that's required at this point would be if council would like to entertain Mayor Law as alternate to the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District.
I'll move Mayor Law be the alternate for the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District.
I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Thank you for the clarification on that statutory position. So Mayor Law, welcome to ICE-T. The next appointed at the pleasure of council is the Municipal Insurance Association. I know Councillor Anderson, you have been a stalwart there. I don't know if anybody would like to take over. You are an incredible asset there, and with Councillor McMaster as your alternate.
More fun than watching paint
Well,
dry.
I know, the excitement never ends, you guys, especially at UBCM. Those guys are crazy. Great. With no changes there, we can move on to VIRL. We have Councillor McMaster as the trustee right now, and Councillor Councillor McMaster as trustee and Councillor Anderson as alternate. Any changes there? Seeing none, I will move on to the Advisory Trust is appointed by council. That's Mike Davis. Tofino Harbor Authority is myself. I'm happy to remain in that position. Great. Nobody wants to take over that. That's an exciting one. You don't know what you're missing. Tofino Housing Corporation. This one I may need a little bit of help on. I know Nyla Tanya has indicated that if somebody wanted to take over that role, and I do maybe need some guidance on this one, maybe I might look to Mr. McPherson in terms of the board configuration and what we may be looking for at this point. I know nothing's highlighted, so I don't know if anything needs to change right here. I would like some guidance, that's all I'm saying. I don't.
Elise is going to watch me struggle a little bit, and then she's going to bail me out.
Oh,
so the board configuration that we have presently is we have three. We have had since the housing corporation kind of reemerged, was we would have 3 councillors plus 1 staff person. I have been a staff person appointed to the housing corporation for the last since it reformed. We do have Councillor McQuaid, who was appointed, who is no longer a council member. Councillor McMaster, who is still on council, and Ms. Atiana was appointed with the understanding that it would be interim, and I think she is more than willing to step aside in favor of a councillor. She was appointed when former Mayor Osborne stepped down to fill the seat, and she does much more than fill the seat. But so the idea is to have 2 councillors in addition to Councillor McMaster, which would be forwarded, and this is where I need help, Elise, as a recommendation to the next annual general meeting of the Housing Corporation, which is coming up, I think, next week.
That's correct. You didn't struggle at all, CAO McPherson.
You'd have said it in a lot less words.
The committee will make a recommendation tonight, and then the AGM is being held at the April 27th meeting of council, and it will be ratified as is necessary for the board, and the board will then move forward. Yeah.
okay, so at this point, maybe we could entertain if anyone from council, Ms. Tanya has as an interim position, if there was someone from council that would be interested, this would be the appropriate time to put your name forward. Councillor Challenger.
Yes, I'd be happy to put my name forward.
Okay. That's wonderful. Councillor Anderson.
If no one else is interested, I'd be happy to sit on this as well. I would certainly defer. So far, the mayor has always sat on this, so I would certainly defer to Mayor Law if he's interested.
Just to clarify, this is to replace Ms. McQuaid's position. Correct.
It's the replacement of if council chooses both Ms. McQuaid as well as Ms. Atiana.
I am happy with that, Councillor Anderson, if you want to take that over. I will, I think I have decided that I'll be attending as an observer, I think as Tofino Housing Corporation, Ian requested. Okay. Just to add that in there,
So I have Councillor Challenger and Councillor Anderson for those 2 council positions. So I'll make the motion from the chair then to Councillor Anderson and Councillor Challenger to the board of, that's at this point, it's to the board of Tofino Housing Corporation.
That's correct.
Thank you. Seconder, thank you, Councillor Thick. All in favor? Motion carried. The next one I have on the list is Tourism Tofino. Councillor Chalmers is the current voting director, and her term was ending March 22nd. Was there any changes?
Sorry, that's ending 2022.
Sorry, 2022. Thank you. Great. Councillor Thick? You're muted.
I would be interested in also being considered for that appointment.
Okay, so once again, I will ask for a process here, Elise. If 2 people are interested in the same position, how do we go about making that decision? Is that a vote of council at this point, or how does one proceed in this circumstance?
that is a decision that the group will make after some discussion amongst yourselves. So it's not, it's not a secret ballot, an election of that kind. You are putting your names forward, potentially making your case for why you would like to be on the board, and council will deliberate and make a motion. Someone will make a motion and it will pass or fail, and we'll move forward from there.
Excellent. So maybe then, Councillor Fick, if you might want, Councillor Chalmers?
Just to clarify, I do believe that we did this council appointment because it came up before their AGM maybe less than a month ago. And so that I was appointed for a year already. And the motion was passed. I believe it was at a mid-June because they had the AGM, which is why the appointment is till March 2022.
Through the mayor, that's correct. That the appointment was fairly recent, and it was to align with the Tourism Tofino annual general meeting, I think in March, as Councillor Chalmers has stated. However, all of these appointments are at the pleasure of council and can be changed at any time. So it really is the decision of council.
Thank you. So what maybe I would like to proceed, maybe Councillor Thick, if you would like to state your case why you think you would like to be in the Tofino Tourism appointed by council position, please go ahead.
Thank you. I don't really have a planned speech, and I'm okay either way. It's the one thing that I feel I heard when I was campaigning over the last few months. I heard very strongly from people, and I made a lot of detailed notes on what people felt and what they felt was important to be considered by council. So I have that knowledge in my head. I have been a part of the Tourism Tofino appointment. I have been appointed before. I have stood on the Minister's Tourism Engagement Council for about 4 years during partially my term in council, and then it ended about a year ago. So I was involved at the provincial level. And I do hold a master's in tourism management from Royal Roads, which I did purposely for the reason of making a contribution in that regard to council. So I think those are some reasons why I feel I would be able to make a good contribution in that regard.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Thick. Councillor Chalmers?
Sure, thank you. I'd very strongly like to stay on it. I've been working very hard to work on the relationships and bring up a lot of the issues that we're seeing from the district, especially over the last 2 years of our council term. I think there's a lot of headway that has been made, and a lot of the history that's happened over the last little bit. I'm also have a good understanding of both the tourism side as well as the district and the community side, and it's one that I feel most strongly about being on and of all of the council positions.
Thank you, Councillor Chalmers. So I would maybe open it up to council. It feels a little uncomfortable, I have to admit. Open it up to some of the other members of council if they have any input into this at this point. Councillor Anderson.
My preference is for Councillor Chalmers. She's been following the COVID situation very closely and working with Tourism Tofino and the Chamber on that. And I think as at least for another year, I think that's an important consideration as well.
Any other comments? Councillor Challenger.
Thank you. Yeah, as much as I think Councillor Thick would also be a great person on this committee, I don't feel that it's necessary to change it at this point when she's been appointed so recently and has been putting a lot of work in recently. So I would be in favor of Councillor Chalmers remaining.
Councillor McMaster.
I think Councillor Fitt would do a great job, but I also think Councillor Chalmers has been doing a very good job. And I think we shouldn't be changing it midstream. So.
Any other discussion? Great. Would it be necessary, I can make a motion from the floor that Councillor Chalmers remain in the position as appointed as the current appointee. Would that be an appropriate motion?
Through the chair, it's not a necessary motion. If the appointment stands just like the others, there's no need to make a motion about it.
Okay. It seems that we would have a majority at this point that has spoken in favor of retaining that. So how would I proceed if there seems to be no support or the support that remains there for Councillor Chalmers? We're good to go. If there is any other comment, do speak now or forever hold your peace. I'm not sure exactly. Councillor Thick.
I'm fine with that. It says in the, there's currently no alternate. So does that mean we don't have an alternate, or we haven't appointed an alternate for that position?
Through the chair, there is no alternate for the Tourism Tofino appointment. We have one appointee, and that's it per their incorporation documents, per their bylaw, society's bylaw. However, this appointment does come up annually, and the discussion will come back to council. We do this annually in the December sort of meeting, and we review other public appointments at that time as well. So there is the opportunity to review again at the end of this year for the 2022 term.
Great, thank you. Any other further discussion? So my feeling is that at this point, the appointment as stands will stand. Would I be correct in that assumption? Thank you. So no motion would be needed then to move forward. The next one on the table is Wickaninnish Community School Society. And right now, this is another one where we've had a discussion. Councillor Chalmers and myself. Councillor Chalmers is the current representative there, non-voting liaison. We had talked about myself taking over as chair or as the appointed person, and that Councillor Chalmers would fill the vacant alternate position. Was there anybody else that were interested in that? So then I will make, Councillor Law.
I just like on the record that I am very interested in, but I will not take over if you guys are very interested. So good luck with it.
Okay. Councillor Chalmers.
I'm happy to. I've really enjoyed my time there. I think it's a great appointment. But having taken up the design review panel as well, if you're interested, Dan, then I'm happy to step down.
Only if you'd like to do that. I'm happy with you there as well. Whatever suits you.
Why don't you take it?
Okay, I'll take it.
So, Councillor Law, you're comfortable being the alternate on the Wickaninnish Community School Society? Excellent. Okay, I will move then that Councillor Stere be the non-voting liaison and the alternate Mayor Law. Could I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor McMaster. All in favor? Motion passed. The next one on the board, Coastal Community Social Procurement Initiative Steering Committee. Wow, that's a mouthful. Right now we have Councillor Anderson in the position and Nyla Tanya, Director of Financial Services. Is there anybody interested? Well, first of all, Councillor Anderson, are you comfortable in that chair as well?
Well, this was a particular interest to our former mayor, Josie Osborne, and she served on this, and I have been doing it since her departure. This is a great one for those that love policy and governance issues. So it's not a real strong interest for me, but I don't mind continuing with it. It's an initiative that started with ABICC funding, I believe, and it has membership, as you can tell, coastal communities. So it's Vancouver Island, Sunshine Coast. There's been interest lately from I think Squamish and other parts of the mainland, and it's rumored that it may go BC wide, this this initiative. So it is it's going to get more interesting, but a lot of the discussion around this table is just about policy around social procurement, and sharing information about success stories around social procurement from the various members of the group. So for those councillors that may not know much about it and the activities, that's a brief overview. I am willing to continue, but for those that have strong interest in developing policy and governance issues, I would be willing to step back and let them fill the position.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. I'm just looking at you, Councillor Thick. I'm not saying that that is your favorite forte, but he's throwing it out there onto the table. I don't know, and I do know you have historically enjoyed policy. Is this something that interests you? I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah, I don't know really enough about it to comment, so I feel, you know, no, I don't think I would be a good candidate at this time. Thanks.
Okay. I don't see anybody really jumping into the foray on this one. So Councillor Anderson, congratulations. I think I will move on to the ACRD Coastal Agricultural Roundtable. I know Councillor Anderson, once again, is in that position. I will first ask, are you comfortable staying in the position that you have been?
I really enjoy this this committee just from a personal aspect. There's a lot of we talk about local food initiatives, local food production, including some marine harvesting of food and foraging, etc. All things that I'm interested in. It's more of a knowledge sharing table, and actually local government rarely comes into the discussion, and I'm one of the only elected officials. I might be the only elected official at that table. When they started it out, this roundtable, they asked for membership from councils, and I think from the ACRD, and council put me there. I'm willing to continue. I think council's interest maybe around community gardens or food security. So I can report back on some of those discussions there. There isn't any real strong position to take forward from council to that table. So if I'm looking for any guidance from council, if there's some policy around food security, local food production, community gardens, those kinds of things. We have some statements, I think, in our OCP and other policies around those things, but they're not active discussions at the council table right now. So having said all that, I am willing to continue with it. I think I get more out of it personally than I can to the council table, though.
I will speak to that at the ACRD, and I've spoken to some of the directors. I do know they do appreciate having you there, Councillor Anderson. I believe, is it Director Shannon or Director Cote? Anyways, it doesn't matter. I do know that your presence there is well appreciated. So if there's nobody else really wanting to get into the agriculture, I think we'll move on to the last one. The Alberta Clackwood Health Network Table of Partners, and I'm just recently, as former Mayor Osborne sat in this position, and it's one that I retained just because I thought it was an important one for the District of Tofino to continue having a presence on. My schedule does not allow me to fulfill the obligations that are necessary here. I think it is an important one. I'm just way oversubscribed and cannot commit to being there. It's a monthly meeting. It addresses many of the, it's an advisory on policy around many of the health, regional health issues in the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District. And I think it is an extremely valuable one for the District of Tofino Council to be sitting on. I just unfortunately cannot commit the time to. So I would like it if there was anybody interested in the types of health issues that affect our region. This is an excellent opportunity to have but there is some great orientation that Marcia DeWitt provides. They're a great group of people, everything from our medical health officers down to our local service providers. It's a great group of people to be involved with. And Councillor Chalmers, you threw a hand up there.
If nobody's interested, I'm happy to do it.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that might be interested in that position? Councillor or Mayor Law.
I'm not. I would be interested, but I have a conflict with timing because Molly Law is on that as well. But I just want to say to Councillor Chalmers, it is it's a great meeting to be there. There's lots of great information, really amazing people on that table of partners. So I encourage you that it is a good choice, Councillor Chalmers.
Would I just Councillor Fick, had your hand up?
Yeah, I'm interested also, but you know, I mean, I'm only sitting on one committee, so I feel like I guess I'm not really, you know, contributing to the full extent. So, yeah. But I don't really want to go through a speech, so.
Councillor Chalmers.
Councillor Thick, if this specific committee is something that you're super interested, I'm happy to hand it over because I am on a few. If it's because you feel that you're not on a lot of committees, I'm happy to hand over a different one, like the design review panel or something. But if this is something that really interests you, then I can step back.
Yeah, I guess I would be interested in hearing, you know, we've heard a little bit about it, but yes, I guess it would be something I would be interested in serving. Is it a year or is it for the term of the council?
So I'll let Elise, I think she probably has more detail. My memory serves me earliest that council appoints another council member, the council member ceases to hold office, or the date of the inaugural meeting in the year of the general local election. I'm just reading. Would that be correct, Elise?
That's exactly correct.
Why, thank you. So you're there until we appoint someone else or to the our next municipal election, 2022, general election. Great. So Councillor Thick, I will make a motion that Councillor Thick be appointed to the Alberni-Clayoquot Health Network Table of Partners. I have a seconder, please. Thank you, Mayor Law. Call the question. All in favor? Great, motion passed. Woo! Congratulations, everybody. Thank you. Let's see now. Did I miss anything, Elise? Just
Through the chair, there was nothing missed. Thank you very much for all of the motions, much appreciated, and they will come back at the next council meeting for ratification, and then we'll notify all of the boards of the changes.
excellent, thank you. So the next is on the agenda is our business initiated by council members, and there is a 8.1 is a verbal updates from councillors regarding internal and external appointments. I don't believe there were any. It is there, but was there any that we may have missed?
Through the chair, there was nothing listed. This is an opportunity that's a standing item on each council agenda for anyone who currently sits on a board or committee to update council on anything that they might find relevant from recent meetings.
Okay, I could be here for 45 minutes, so I won't. I'll pass on that right now. Unless there's anybody else, I'll move on to item 8.2. I believe we talked about this or haven't yet. The Federation of Canadian Municipalities annual conferences. And I believe it, is there, do you have anything you want to add? I don't know. I know that it's a conference that Mayor Osborne has attended in the past. And we just, at the ACRD, we just approved, it's virtual this year. So they're, the ability, the registration fee is quite low. I don't know what our budget is or was for that. I know in the past we did a little sharing with the ACRD in terms of sending Mayor Osborne to the conference. At the ACRD, it was suggested that it's a great conference, and that with the low registration fees, if there were a number, I don't know what we have in our recommendation, but that that the ability to go was very valuable, and that anybody on the ACRD that was interested in going, there was enough of a budget put forward to allow everybody that was interested to go. So I'll just throw that out there. And if Councillor Chalmers.
I actually am not interested in going, but just anecdotally in conversations I have had with former Mayor Osborne, is she only found it useful when it was in Ottawa because she was able to make a lot of connections that would sort of help that. But as far as the conference, she always said it wasn't that helpful, but it being a low amount and virtual this year, because I think the cost of sending her so far away was a bit much, but if maybe because it was low, it might be a good sort of check-in for us, but I'm not interested.
Bob, I don't know. Do you have any comment on it? I don't know if just that might be relative to council. I don't think a lot of us know a lot about the actual content of the conference. I looked at the content. It does look a few interesting things, but
sorry, I haven't looked at the content of this conference. It's essentially the UBCM conference on a federal level. It has been hosted in this province before. It's widely attended from across Canada. Some councils from very small places send like a strong number of councillors each time. It's not been something that that the district has often sent attendees to. I think that we find that a lot of our issues are more provincial in nature, and put our resources into sending councillors to UBCM instead of this.
Mayor Law.
Yeah, I did. Just to update everybody, I did bring this forward because past Mayor Osborne did enjoy going to this conference, but then I did look at the conference and really found the length of the conference and the topics. I thought I probably, if I did attend, I probably would only go to a very few actual the seminars. So I could revisit wanting to go to this one in favor of AVICC. I'm just letting everybody know if nobody else is interested in going.
Councillor Anderson?
Just my experience in the past is generally it's chairs or mayors from around our region that attend this. We could authorize Mayor Law to attend it and then leave it up to him whether he wants to attend virtually or not after he's looked into it a little bit more, and I'd be happy with that.
Sure. I know that there is an early registration cheap ticket potential. If there was any other councillors, we could make the recommendation. If there was any councillors that would be interested, we could make that motion airing up to however many councillors were interested. Was there any councillor that was screaming to attend or even shouting? No. Okay. Well, maybe from the chair, I'll move that the mayor be authorized to attend the FCM 2021 annual conference to be held virtually from May 31st to June 4th, 2021. Second that. Thank you, Councillor Chalmers. All in favor? Motion carried. The next one, Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities, the AVICC Annual General Meeting and Convention in May 28th. Well, I know many people here have been, and it is a very valuable one. There has been talk in the past about amending the resolution process there, but I don't think that's going to be on the table. I can make, is there any one that wouldn't be interested in going? And then we can make a motion and I can throw the number X into a reality.
I
Councillor-
wondered what the time was. I have a time conflict there, so I wasn't sure how, like if I should try and change that or not, depending on how important that might be for me to attend.
It is on April 28th. I don't know the length of time. It's like an all day sort of thing. It is only the one day, I believe. Councillor Chalmers, you.
I would say a lot of them last year were recorded, so you could watch them later. So it would be worth moving it now so you can go and maybe look at the detailed time. And the only thing that you'd want to see live would be the motions. So we could look at that, and I can go through the schedule with you and we can see if it works.
Okay, great. Yeah, that works. Thank you.
Okay, so maybe I'll move from the chair that up to 7 council members be authorized to attend the ABICC virtual AGM and convention to be held virtually on May 28th, 2021. Thank you, Councillor McMaster. All in favor? Great, motion passed. I should have maybe checked in if we have enough money to send anyone, but it's not my job, I don't think. Great. So moving on, we do have under item 9, unfinished business. There was a request at our council meeting through a delegation to oppose logging of at-risk old growth forests in BC, and this was referred from that council meeting on April 13th. And I think I will chime in at some point, but I would really like to hear maybe at the committee of the whole the ability for council to have a bit of a discussion around the motion that was brought forward by Joanna Streetley at the delegation. And if they have any comments on that, I will speak to it at the end, but I would like to hear from the rest of council on this, if they wouldn't mind. I don't know if it'd be appropriate just maybe to go around in this circle, and that way you have to speak. And if I go through my little screen here, I would start with Mayor Law, if you wouldn't mind starting us off.
Thank you, Councillor Stere. I just want a little clarification on this. Are we talking about writing a letter now, or the content of the letter, or our reasons behind it, why we support this?
Sure. And yeah, so maybe I should have gone first. Anyways, I think what the intent might be is to have a discussion around the letter itself and how we might approach this. I think there are a variety of ways, a couple of ways that I think might be appropriate. In this circumstance, having a discussion around maybe if people have the ability to review the old growth, review the strategy, and if they had comments maybe in general about what was brought forward in terms of the recommendations of that, and then maybe speak a bit to the request from Ms. Streetley. Councillor Chalmers, I see you had your hand up. You're great at helping me out with these things. Maybe
yeah, well, may I recommend, I had a really good conversation with you yesterday that I think a lot of my comments would kind of fall under anyway. And I think that you had a great idea. If you did go first, I think it would help focus the direction. If anybody had any differences, then those could be brought up. But I think the motion that you're kind of thinking of is something that I would really support. So I'd love to hear.
Thank you, Councillor.
Not to put you on the spot there, but I just enjoyed our conversation.
No, thank you. I will. I have been involved in this issue for about 3 decades, and so I did have a direction that I would like to see and maybe discuss with council. I was going to bring forward a notice of motion, not for next council meeting. I don't think we have enough time, but to the following one. And it's mostly regarding a response to the province regarding the implementation of the recommendations of the Old Growth Strategic Review. And I think it would encompass a lot of the issues that Ms. Streetley and Ms. Fraser brought forward at their delegation. What I'm thinking about is that the direction I would like to see is in fact the support of those there was 14 recommendations, and there were 2 in particular. All of them I think are important to move forward, but there were 2 that had some expediency attached to them. And I think one of them was the consultation process with First Nations, which is an ongoing process. And the second one, which was, I believe, recommendation number 6, was the referral, the recommendation, sorry, to defer logging in those ecosystems that were quite sensitive in terms of the nature of biodiversity. And looking at a deferral process in the immediacy, that was one of the immediate recommendations that was brought forward from the strategic review. And I think it would be appropriate, as the historical significance that Tofino has had in addressing forest management policy in the province. I think this is an important time for the District of Tofino to continue that legacy of bringing forward support and suggestions as to the implementation of what I can only characterize as a major paradigm shift in the way we view the management of forests in British Columbia, not just Clayoquot Sound, which has always been our focus, but in the whole province itself. So that's the direction that I was thinking of moving forward with this, bringing a notice of motion forward. And I guess I did want to get a sense if there was to be support for moving that notice of motion forward. Well, in essence, the intent of that notice of motion to move that forward. So that's kind of where I was going with it. Thank you, Councillor Chalmers, for giving me the opportunity to make that case. And maybe now I'll go around the circle, if that would be a little more appropriate, Mayor Law, if maybe you would like to start, being you're at the top of my screen.
Thank you. And I do concur with what you just said, Councillor Stere. I would like to point out that in my personal opinion, that political letters are not something that I would like to see happen very often. For the history of Tofino, you know, our place in forest management practices and standing out in times of need. So I just want to say that this, for me, I do support this. I support Tom or Councillor Stere, what you said, and that it is, just to be clear, it's in my view, hopefully an unusual step in that way. I think the less we say on the political level in these ways, the more impact what we do say hopefully will have.
Thank you, Mayor Law. And Councillor Anderson, you're next to my screen. I know you have a long history as well, having served on the Central Region Board, and were intimately involved several decades ago as well. I'd be very interested in hearing your position.
Yeah, well, I read the highlights of the report, and I support the recommendations. I think that what I've learned from the Central Region Board days, how key it is to totally involve the First Nations in the decisions on the lands that are part of their territory, they're part of their history, and part of the legacy that was here when settlers arrived. It's abundantly clear that old growth forests in particular is at risk. Ecosystems and biodiversity is at risk, and the report certainly goes into that, covers off the importance of Indigenous involvement, that relationship with the province in moving forward on forestry policy, and the future of what little remains of old growth. So I would certainly support a council motion that would support the recommendations. I would like to see it not go forward in terms of a reactionary response or a point of activism. I'd like to see it worded carefully, that you know, we encourage the province to make the right decisions in this area, and not that we're making the decisions. So I believe Councillor Stere, perhaps you're probably keenly interested in this topic, and I'm not sure if it was if there was any particular council that is giving a notice of motion and will go away and craft this, because it seems like a fairly lengthy motion to work on. So I don't know if you would volunteer for that job. But anyways, I'd be happy to work with any other councillors in crafting that motion and bringing it forward.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. I have reached out to one of our staff who has helped me before in crafting these motions, and they have given me the assurances that they will help me in making sure that my wordsmithing is accurate. Next on my screen is Councillor Thick.
Thank you. Yeah, I am in favor personally, and I'd like to just concur with what Mayor Law said. I do think, you know, I haven't really had the chance to canvass many people on this issue. I think I could guess what people might say, but I don't know for sure. I think the part that I'm a little bit hesitant about is that that when we make motions to the provincial government, I'm just not sure sometimes when that is the right thing and it's not the right thing. And I'm not saying I personally agree with what is being asked. I've read the report, and I in particular like the points that were made on page 144 of our handout today. I really feel strongly about the biodiversity risk and the potential loss with old growth forests. And I appreciated the point that was made, the subtle interface that we as a District of Tofino have, you know, enjoyed between tourism and old growth forests. So I hear that, I see that, I understand it full well. And I personally support a motion. I preferred the motion that was given as an example from the City of Victoria because of its succinctness. So I can't craft that, but I'm willing to support that if others of the council feel that this is the right way to go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thick. And Councillor Chalmers, you're next on the list.
I appreciate everything everybody said and agree with, and I'm supportive of you making the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Chalmers. Councillor McMaster.
Similar to Mayor Law, I'm not a fan of writing political messages. I often think it's a waste of time. Personally, I'm in favour of opposing old growth logging, and I think with Tofino's history, it would be remiss of us not to write a letter of support. So I'm happy to support whatever council comes up with as a motion.
Thank you, Councillor McMaster. Councillor Challenger.
Thank you. Yes, this is one that when it came up, I felt quite strongly about, but also a little lost being new, not only to council, but to politics in general. And I appreciate the criticism that comes to municipalities for writing political letters. So I appreciate the thoughtfulness that all of you have put into it. And I think that writing a letter, as Councillor Anderson stated, not so much in just reaction, but due to our unique situation and in a more thoughtful way that isn't simply an activist statement, is great. And I'm really grateful for many of your histories and experience in this. So I'm in support. To finish that off, thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor Challenger. So I think probably I took quite a few notes here, and in summary, there seems to be a consensus of being uncomfortable in general with political. I don't intend this motion to be political in the true sense of the word. We can define that each in our individual way, but and I don't want it to absolutely not be a reactionary response. This is not the intent at all. There are some this is a major paradigm shift in the way we look at the management of forests in British Columbia. And we have been an active part in that for many decades at the Tofino level. And so I would like to craft it in a response of supporting those recommendations and pointing out the areas of possibly where expediency could be moved forward in those. My fear often, and where I would finally tune that line of politicism, is my experience, and I think Councillor Anderson may remember back in the day that in the negotiations that we were often involved with, there was this, I hate to use the word talk and log, but that's essentially what it was. And I want to ensure that that in this process moving forward, in this negotiated process, and that the very thoughtful recommendations through that strategic review of over 800 stakeholders throughout the province, that we encourage and support the province in moving forward on this, because it is an incredibly important piece of policy that will be coming forward, I believe. So thank you very much for everyone's input. I do believe, Elise, that I should make a notice of motion. I can just make a verbal notice of motion, I believe, to bring forward a notice of motion regarding a response to the province regarding the implementation of the recommendations of the old growth strategic review for the, I think the May 11th regular council meeting would give enough time to craft that motion. I think that's all that's necessary, right?
Through the chair, that is all that's necessary, is to verbally state your intention to bring forward a notice of motion. A timeline isn't necessary, but if you'd like to include one, I'll certainly include that in the minutes if we want to make sure this is done in a timely manner in response to both the delegation as well as the province.
Yeah, and that in conversation, I think this, if this were to come forward, it would have to come forward before Thursday. So it could be on the agenda for next council. I think that's
correct. We would need to be working on this right after this meeting in order to meet our own internal deadlines of review to get it on the April 27th meeting. So a May meeting is certainly more achievable from my perspective. Happy to work with you on the initiative.
Great, thank you. I think that will be the appropriate way to go then. So with that verbal notice of motion, we can include that May 11th. It just helps giving me a timeline as well. I believe that is the end of our agenda, except we do have a question period. And Lisa, is there anybody signed up tonight to ask a question?
Through the chair, no one has signed up to ask a question. I may pause while I'm speaking, just in case any of the participants wanted to use the Q&A function at this moment. Going once, twice, 3 times, no one is signing up to ask a question of council.
Great, thank you, Elise. So with that in mind, the next one is a motion for adjournment, please. Thank you, Councillor McMaster, seconded by everybody in the planet. All those in favor? Great. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate everything tonight.